check the pump. Oh, it is. It is. I see it. Good. Good morning, good day, good evening, whatever part of the world you're tuning in from. Welcome to BENALAMEDA. Today we will talk about the difference between the 302 and the 351. 289 falls the same category as the 302, and I would like to just share some of the differences as far as how the block is put together. In fact, I weighed the 351 and 172 pounds, bare, okay, with the main cap bolts and everything, 172 pounds, and then the 302 weighs in at about 127 or 128 pounds. That's a difference of about 44 pounds between the two. When you look at this thing closer, it doesn't seem to be very much. Come to think of it, because they share the same head bolts, they share the same timing chain, cover, of course, timing chain. There's a lot of interchangeability between the two, except the oil pump shaft. But you can use the same dampener, you can use the same flex plate, bell housing, everything is a straight swap. And I would advise best, like we're talking straight here, torque is king. You cannot beat, especially when you have a street car with some kind of weight. What is light? Well, that's subjective. Given that kind of a problem, or should I say a problem, given that kind of scenario, torque or displacement will always pretty much dominate. Okay, you just cannot go up with a 302 in the same type Mustang, early style Mustang or Fox body, against a 351 stock to stock. The 351 will dominate because of the fact that it has more torque. When you look at these things here, the difference, like I said, is 44 pounds. But by the time you put all the accessories in, head bolts, being half-inch if you're running ARP or SPS, or whatever company you intend on using for your fasteners or your head bolts or head studs, there is a difference. Okay, half-inch bolts are a lot heavier than 7/16. Same thing with the main caps. The main caps on 302 is also smaller. Okay, and the amazing part is, years ago in the 1970s, early 80s, I realized that the 351 Windsor share the same main cap bolts, even to fasten a windage tray with a big block Chevy. So nobody sells anything for Fords back then. Heads, what's that for them? All right, there are limited number of intake manifolds, camshaft. So I ended up using big block Chevy main cap bolts. And then I was able to fasten my own windage tray at that point in time. So if you have any of your buddies there with a dead big block Chevy in their shop, grab the the main cap bolts or main studs, and you're more than halfway home. You get something without spending for anything. So we share everything on the front. Dampener. Now, we will talk about crankshaft weight as well. And fortunately, a lot of these cranks that I'll show you here today are 28-ounce balance weight, and I like less counterweight on the dampener and the flex plate or the flywheel. I don't like a lot of weight being swung around off the center, and you have an imbalanced situation there. I don't care if you you counter that with more weight on the crank, counterweights. I just like to keep everything within the 5 main caps, and all the rotational stresses, okay, is all confined within the center of the block, or the middle part of the block. That's why I like center counterweighted crankshafts, and I run a 0 flex plate, flywheel, or dampener. I like to keep everything inside. Remember, at high RPM, the crank wants to twist to an S, and when it wants to twist to an S, the number 2 and number 4 main cap bolts take a lot of the stress, because the crank is wanting to bend, and when it wants to bend to an S, 2 and 4 takes the brunt. That's why when you look at these main caps, you look at number 1, 3, and 5 looks good, but 2 and 4 is usually wore out, and you see a lot of cap bounce happening between the cap and the saddle of the block. That's one indication that you are pretty much detonating and twisting the crank. That's why you see this stress on the number 2 and number 4 main caps. So we start with this crankshaft. We'll start with stock 302, stock 351, and I'll show you guys the differences between the two, and then we go from there. Okay, we have the 302 and the 351. A lot of them are nodular iron. They're not really that bad. I've seen the 302 make 600 horsepower easy at the rear wheel. On a blower application, you actually break the block before you break this crank. So I give it credit because it's a shorter stroke, 3-inch. And that being said, there's a lot less stress than you have on a 351. The 351, on the other hand, has a lot stouter block than a 302, and you'll break the stock crank before you break the block. So it's a complete reverse with a 302, as well as you can make a lot more power with a 351. Remember, the weight difference is 44 pounds, but now you're looking at the crank differences. I think what do we have here? 54 pounds, 54.4 pounds for the 351, and the 302 is 37.6. There's a difference there. So when you look at the weight of the block, you got to consider that this has 3-inch main, and this is excuse my thing here. This is 250. Okay, so there is a lot of rotational. Remember, when you're winging this, either you have a stick shift or a high stall converter. This has a lot more power due to the fact that you have stored energy, rotational energy, inertia, while you're bringing the RPMs up on a 351 as opposed to the 302. Just the weight alone. Okay, and I've seen differences with trying to drive an aluminum flywheel small block Ford or Chevy or Chrysler. It's hard to drive on the street because you don't have the inertia of the heavier flywheel. When you have a heavier flywheel, okay, it will not accelerate as quickly through the gears, granted, but when you're trying to leave the line, you drop the clutch. You don't have really that much displacement, any kind of stored rotational energy from the weight of the crank does play into the equation. And when we tested an aluminum flywheel supercharged small block Ford HO versus one with a billet flywheel, you know what? It's amazing. The ET, the billet flywheel small block blown actually left the line. Her 60-foot was superior to the one with an aluminum flywheel. And the guy, what was his name, Carlos, told me, he says, Ben, I didn't see any difference. The ET ended up being the same. But the heavier flywheel car, or crankshaft here for the matter, they're all connected into one scenario here. it was so much easier to drive. You just drop the clutch and mash the pedal. Whereas the aluminum flywheel one, or a lighter rotational assembly, when you try to do that, it's either you bog or fall flat on his face, or you blow the tires. So it's an iffy situation, kind of finicky, and it's a lot harder to drive. And he was so inconsistent. You can tell this cast pieces when you see a parting line, okay, right there, and you also have it on 302. All right, now take note of this sound. That seems to be a little harder. Okay, remember what I said earlier about the 302? The crank will survive. You break the block before you break the crank. Listen to the sound. Now let me listen to one of my forgings here. You can probably hear it there. You hear the sound? That's an indication of your crank material. That one there on the floor that I just tapped is very hard. It's a forging, or is that even a billet? That's a forging. A billet will even have a better sound than that. Therefore, if I know they're both nodular iron, but I wonder what they changed here into the casting that made it so much stronger. Granted that you have the stroke being less by half an inch. I wonder, because this is telling me something. Let's move on to the next one. This one here, you don't have hardly any counterweight. You have a whole bunch here, okay? Thicker, or actually wider as opposed to here. It's a little shorter. See this much here as compared to that. So you have a lot more counterweight on the back side everywhere else, especially right here and right here. You are taking in a lot more weight, rotational weight, 42 pounds compared to the stock 302 of 37. There's not much there, but still some weight. 37 for this guy here, and 42 for that. 5 pounds of rotational energy there. It comes into play. All right. Not only does that have a more stroke, as you can tell, this is farther out. Oh, but this is a little bit different here. I had SCAT make me several of these 347, 3400 stroke 302 with small block Chevy, not 2.1, but 2-inch 283 journals, because I'm trying to decrease the weight of the crankshaft. At the same time, I'm trying to improve the less need for a lot of oil pressure because of bigger rod bearings and stuff. The rotational drag is a lot less. The surface speed of the bearings is smaller. The larger the bearing, okay, the more oil pressure it needs, because you have a lot more surface to keep lubricated. A smaller journal, you know, like you're rotating from this area to a smaller diameter, your bearing speed, surface speed is a lot less, so you actually get away with less oil pressure and not have any issues about main bearing reliability and all that, or rod bearing reliability. That right there is a plus. Okay, the 302 and a 351, okay, we're looking at 302 forging, my SCAT, and the factory one. If you look at here closely, look at this counterweight here, and look at this counterweight here. A lot less. Okay, it's hard to see to this thing. Counterweight here, hardly any counterweight there. Okay, and there and to here. All right, look how much smaller that one there. That's larger. Definitely a lot stronger. Okay, so from the front you get a bigger counterweight than this guy here, and a partial counterweight there, and a full counterweight here. So you can see the difference there, right? Look at that, all the way there to the back, and you look at here, there, and ends up just a short distance. So there you go, guys, the showing of the counterweights. Okay, we're looking at 2, 3, 4, 7 crankshafts. It's 42 pounds, and a forging right here is 46 pounds. Okay, and there's a lot of difference between the strength of the two. This one on a stock block will hold and probably break the block. And this one here, you know what though, I'm not going to take anything away from this thing. I see them make 550, 600 horsepower with a cast 347 crank. It does got a lot to do with what boost you make or what RPMs you're trying to achieve. Come on, don't expect a cast thing and turn 9,000 RPM. It just won't happen. Okay, so let's not blame the manufacturer. In this particular thing here, I'm showing the scat crankshafts. They've been very good to me. Thomas Sheets over there, and the owner, when I first showed up there several years ago, he gave me a tour of the plant and showed me all the stuff that they do, and I was very happy with the hospitality and showed me what they're capable of doing. And they try to wrestle me away from another manufacturer making my billet crankshafts for me. Much appreciated. Thomas there's given me all this weight information to compare. But anyway, this one here with a cut down rod. Okay, here's the Chevy Journal on this 347. Okay. And then, oh, wait a minute. This cast one here comes with a 2/125. Okay? Yeah, stock diameter. And look at this, 2-inch Chevy. Alright? Look how much smaller that is. This is a 2-inch journal. Again, the counterweights are similar. When I cut down, just in case for you guys that want to know, when I cut into a 2-inch journal from a 2/100 Chevy as opposed to a standard 302 here, I only cut down 0.2 of a pound. Okay, that's not much reduction, but I wasn't after weight reduction per se. I was after the rotational drag and the lubricating issues with a bigger diameter rod bearing or main bearing. I try to slow down the bearing speed. This is a road racing engine, and the other one I have there is for a drag motor. Has a Honda journal. Okay, a very, very light combination. So that's what I got. And 0.2 of a pound difference cutting down. There's not much there to be noticed. All right, but bearing speed by running a smaller journal rod bearing, the rod becomes lighter as well. Okay, we're looking at both crankshafts. First, we'll look at the leading edge of the counterweight. See this one here? It's rounded. All right. Right there also, it's rounded. Rounded. Well, those are the three. I don't want to turn the crank around. When you look at the forging, which is more of the high performance version, this is sharper. All right. And It may look better, but aerodynamically speaking, this is in reverse. This is more correct. All right? Because when you look at the leading edge of a wing, it looks more like this, rounded, and the trailing edge is sharper or thinner. This is in reverse. Okay? So that is the leading edge, rounded, more appropriate. This is okay for the uninitiated. They think this is more aero, but it is not. Now, let me flip this around and look at the leading edge. This is the rotation supposed to go. That's the leading edge. And this is the the trailing edge. So this is the trailing edge of the crank. Let's see, get a better view of that. Okay, trailing edge. You notice it's sharper or thinner towards the end. When you look at here, it's more blunt on the end. When you look at an aircraft wing, it is usually rounded on the front and thinner towards the end of the wing or the trailing edge. This is in reverse. This is thicker on the trailing edge. It should have been the other way around. The trailing edge should have been like this, rounded instead of sharp. Okay, so here we go. The more low performance casting is actually aerodynamically more correct. Again, you look at the leading edge of that counterweight and you look at the leading edge of this counterweight on the forging. That is sharp. When you flip this, then it's more blunt. But it's somewhat rounded, not as blunt as the standard crank that we see out there. Here, when we look at the trailing edge, it's more thinner. This is correct. This is aerodynamically not correct. And I've seen old pictures of old cranks back in the 80s where this is blunt, straight cut right there. This is somewhat rounded off, so it kind of helps. That straight cut or even this semi-rounded issue or kind of wide creates a lot of low pressure area right here or vacuum condition. When this is spinning so fast going this way, it creates a low pressure area and brings all the oil from the sump up to the crankshaft. That's why you see a lot of the counterweights, the crank is covered in an oil mist, because this low pressure area right here creates such a negative pressure or vacuum, as they say, that all the oil is hanging around the counterweight. It doesn't draw down. See, look at this. Well, guess what? That is not bad. Okay, that is a lot more thinner than this. Let's look at the cast one. This is even more correct. Counterweight, trailing edge, counterweight, trailing edge, forging, cast. Okay, guys, what you're looking at is, well, maybe because I'm just an aerospace knucklehead and understand how the air is supposed to flow, but this is not the way it should be. That's too blunt. Place low pressure. That is more that's more correct. Okay, it probably doesn't matter at this level, but if you're doing a lot of high RPM spinning, well, you're gonna come into some kind of issue with your oiling and the windage. Additional information on cranks and counterweights into more detail, please check my video from a year ago, Oiling Systems and Cranks Effects on Power. It gives a more detailed analysis on crank counterweight design and function. Okay, I almost forgot. Between the cast at 42 pounds, 46 on a forging, and the lightweight ones that they make from Scat and others are down by 2 pounds to 44 pounds. 44 pounds on a lightweight crank. So you're paying the extra money 2 pounds less. So go figure. If you're all out racing or some serious stuff, that might be a good alternative or a good option. But if you're running on the street, I could hardly see any difference. Okay, 2 pounds is not going to break the budget thing, but still money. Okay, and it is what you're trying to achieve. Okay. Oh, and also between the 325 stroke 331 combination and 347, the crank weight is basically the same. Okay, I don't think it's even a half a pound. Okay, or like between the cast and 0.2 between cutting down the rod journal. There's not much there. Now we have what is 2 351s. This one here, excuse the mess, that's off my old race car that ran in the 90s. It's a Crower fully counterweighted, and it weighs in at 49 pounds. That's heavy. Okay, and there was no lightening done to it. If you notice, it's got extra counterweight on the middle part. Here, there's nothing. Look at here. All right. Here's another look at the center counterweight. Look at that there. No weight towards the middle. And look how much I got here. There's a bunch more right there. Nothing there. Okay? And right there. There's significantly a lot more being swung around to try to balance this at high RPM and put all the loads from the dampener to the block itself instead of all the dampener has extra weight, 28 or 50. Now it's neutral. Okay, so that's the difference. Now let me also say, on Huey DeWitt's race car, I got a Crower similar billet crank. It weighs, as far as I remember, I think 34 or 36 pounds. That's a lot less, okay? Because it was gun drilled, and it's got pendulum cut counterweights, not like here, it's a full counterweight. It's pendulum cut, gun drilled, knocked down to 2-inch Chevy journal or Honda journal. There's a lot of weight taken off. And of course, aggressive on the lightning holes on the throws to try to cut down the weight, and they did a pretty doggone good job. And according to Scat Cranks, they can do just as good as what Crower made for us, and I don't doubt it. As far as street performance is concerned, and some kind of street and strip application, a lot of you love the 408. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an impressive combination. More bang for the buck, especially with street cars weighing 3,000 pounds or a little more. I had more success with a 4100 stroke, and Scat and the others provide that, or even better, a 4170. A tad short than the 4250 without being too large. And I tell you what, I've built some very good strong running stock suspended Fox body cars running the mid to low 9s with a 4170 stroke, and some with a 4100 who want a little bit of an RPM. When you're looking at the combination of 4-inch 408 and a 4250, in between is a 4170, and slightly less of that is a 4100 stroke. Excuse me, man, I'm trying to burp again. This hiccups. Anyway, when you have a 4100 stroke, again, like I said before, the stroke is your cubic inches. 410, okay? 4100 is a 410 cubic inch on a standard 4-inch bore. If you go 40 over, that's 8 inches more. So 410% is 418. If you have a 4170 stroke, okay, and you end up with a 40 over, Okay, 417 plus 60, I mean, if it's 40 over or 30 over plus 6, 170, 417. 40 over, you add 8 inches to that, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 426. That is, what people sometimes don't appreciate is a slight increase in stroke is very, very telling. Okay? And you want a stump puller? Oh yeah, 250 stroke. Okay, you can easily get 440 out of a 40 over or 60 over out of a factory block. But for those of you guys with lightweight Mustangs, or you can apply the same thing with a small block Chevy. You know, go into a 4-inch stroke instead of 375. The only issue there is your connecting rod might hit the camshaft, so you need a small base circle, which with the Ford 302 or 351, even though the deck height on 351 is the same, the distance with the cam and the crank is the same. Okay, and you can put a 250 stroke, but it's not practical on an 8.2 deck, but on a 9.5 deck, why not? It works. Okay, you're not going to have issues as long as you use an I-beam, an H-beam with a laid down shoulder. Okay, not squared off. And also, when you do the strokers, especially you want a little bit more on the RPM side with a 4100 or 4250, if you really want to be serious about it, I run a Crower I-beam rod. They are just as light as the aluminum rods. In fact, when you're holding an I-beam Crower billet and an aluminum rod from GRP or whatever, Charles and Albert or whatever company you might have, you can, with your eyes closed, you can even tell which is which. It's that good. Now here are some of the weights of the connecting rods and pistons when they're together between the 302 and the 351. Okay, stock and with the H-beam and some with the I-beam. Okay, and look at this information right here. Here's a 4250 stroke, 3-inch main, and let me just measure that real quick. The rod journals are 2100 Chevy, 3-inch main. Yes. This is by another company. Scat doesn't make this combination with a 3-inch main Windsor, and according to Scott Thomas there, they don't think it's a sound choice to have that much crank 4250 that's bigger than most big block Chevys being built out there. 4250 is quite a lot of stroke for a small block, and by the time your aluminum headed out and intake manifold, all that, you probably weigh under 500 pounds for a factory block displacing 440 cubic inches. And then when you go with an aftermarket, you bore 155, 125, you're about 450 inches. But factory wise, factory block, and I've done it, don't intend on turning it a lot of RPM, like 8,000 RPM, it just won't take it. All right, it's a forging, indeed. What Scat and others are concerned about is this overlap between the rod diameter and the main. If it's a 2750 Cleveland, all right, this overlap is less. Okay, there's not much overlay of the forging to give it strength. Okay, there's no such thing as a 4250 cast crank. They're all forged, and they're harder and harder to find. This is for a customer of mine that ordered it not that long ago, and I get a lot more inquiries. If I can get some more, perhaps I could. On the street, it's very, very impressive. having that much stroke on a small block. That is very light. When you're looking at a big block, 850, 900 pounds with a 4-inch stroke, big block Chevy, 398 for FE, 460, 385, 383, 440. Well, 383 has got 335 stroke. that's small, and I forgot what the 440s were, and they don't have as much stroke as this guy here. It's very impressive. The other companies, like I said, only come with a Cleveland. Scat only comes with a Cleveland main for the 4250 stroke. And if you have an aftermarket block, you want to go that route. It's not an RPM engine combination, but a torque monster on the street, stoplight to stoplight, even Grand Prix. I mean, even stoplight drags, well, it'll be hard to beat. Okay? And if you got a fairly light car or medium weight car with that much torque, that much stroke, you'll embarrass a lot of people. Okay? And it's not going to be a slouch. I recommend when you go with this much stroke, 4250 or even 4-inch, I would prefer that you internally balance the engine and keep all the stresses on the confines of the main caps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As opposed to having a counterweight outside, and then this is trying to twist to an S. Not going to be a fun thing to do. Please subscribe, like, and share.